Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Anime Watch Club, a bi-weekly group discussion and review where the hosts of the WDYSA Anime Podcast nominate and vote on shows either we haven't seen or shows that hopefully lead to a great discussion. On today's episode, the host of the WDYSA Anime Podcast will be reviewing the 2015 anime Yuri Kuma Arashi. Let's meet today's dancing bears. Growl, growl. First up is Kat. Kat, you must choose between DMing D&D going forward or granting the Carolina Panthers a Super Bowl-bound season. You must choose.
I would rather just keep DMing because if the Panthers get back to the Super Bowl again, guess what's going to happen? They're going to lose again. And I'd rather just not go again.
That's fair.
I'd rather just find another team.
That is fair. Making his return to the pod, you must choose between being able to delete tweets or talk about Yumaneko. We have Has.
Oh, man.
Those are two of his favorite things.
The permanence of ideas scares me too much. I'm sorry, Yumaneko.
That's fair. I literally replied to a Has tweet today and he deleted it. So
Yep, I did.
I actually think that's a theme of Yumaneko Has, so you hit it.
Yeah.
It's actually a Yumaneko reference. Our first moderator of the night. You must choose between watching shows that involve time loops or shows that involve stargazing scenes. We have Miles.
I'm sorry, I gotta pick the time loops.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Damn.
That's
R.I.P.
not what
romance.
If I go back in time, I haven't made this decision yet. So think about
good
that.
point. Good point. And our bubbly moderator, Pat.
Thank you. All right, guys. Which do I choose? Do I choose to delete this PBR first or this Bailey's Irish Cream? Who knows? I don't know.
Why not both?
Maybe probably not at the same time, but maybe they will both be deleted at some point. Yeah, I'm gonna mix that. You know what? Let's do it. No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna ruin it.
If you shotgun a PBR on screen, I will do something.
I'll cash app you like $10 right now.
You guys don't realize I've got like 4 cans sitting right here ready to roll. So.
No.
I'm not the one who offered you $10. So.
I'm also not going to give you $10 if you do it.
Damn.
Well, with Kat's answer of knowing that he would lose, we know that he's the teacher bear. So it makes sense that he would just lie about giving someone $10.
I got something sharp that I could open this can with if I had to. But yeah, no, we'll hold off on shotgunning beers in front of my thousands of dollars worth of electronic equipment just in case to be
Good
safe.
plan.
Yeah, so why don't we talk about hunting rifles instead that in Yuri Kuma Arashi or Love Bullet is Yuri Bear Storm as well as what it's called in English apparently. I don't know. It's a like Pete said, show from 2015 done by Studio Silverlink, who have done, what else have they done? I feel like I recognize that name.
Non Biori.
Banger.
Wow. Banger. Oh, they did
Okuro Connect.
Yep,
Not a
Kokoro
banger.
Connect. No, they did
Bakatsu Test.
Not a
wow, you're really
banger.
going. I was gonna say they did the Bofuri.
Yep.
Bofuri D's
Banger.
nuts.
Oh, and Villainous.
And
We're back,
Villainous,
baby.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Yeah. And so that's what that studio's done. Oh, and Bofuri season 2, believe it or not. These nuts.
Chivalry of a Failed Knight. They have a bunch of pretty okay shows.
Pretty mediocre shows, which is funny because it's also done by the director who I personally recognize because of Sarazan Mai, but also of his fame from doing, I believe he did Revolution Girls Utena as well. Probably said that name wrong, whatever. Can't remember his name off the top of my head, but yeah, he's a very famous director, so I'm surprised that we don't see the other works there. He must have bounced around studios or something, but it does look very similar to those shows in terms of art style, which I think is interesting. But yeah, why don't we do our first impressions? Miles, why don't you start us off? And yeah, whether you recommend the show as well or not. Spoiler free, by the way, which is the show's pretty heavy spoilery. So
Yeah, so I learned about this show through an anime trivia bot that we have on our server, and it looked insane when I saw like the clips of it. Or no, it was through the anime Wordle we do. That's what I learned about it from. So like looking through the clips of it, it looked like absolutely crazy. And then I learned that the show was called Lesbian Bear Storm. And my dear friend Preston, who I've never said a mean word about, was like, you should nominate it for Watch Club, Miles. And I said, Yes, I will do that. So that's all I knew about this going in. Like, I love Revolutionary Girl Uta. No idea it was the same director until like I started the show and was like, is this just Revolutionary Girl Utana? Which, like, spoiler alert, it kind of is, but that's okay. I loved this. This is going to be a controversial opinion. I would recommend this to people. I think that it's like really weird. Cat looks disgusted at that. There's like definitely some like etchy moments. Like, it has the etchy tag, and it more or less earns that. It's definitely on the lighter end, I think, of things that have that tag, but the tag is deserved. However, I think it's a really good show. I think it's really fun. So sort of know what you're going into, but if you're not turned off by that, I would watch it.
That's fair. Yeah. So like a recommendation with a caveat saying like, oh, but be ready. Like I think that
Yeah.
that's fair.
It's a weird show, but I like weird things, and I think if you're watching our Yuri Kuma Arashi episode, you're probably familiar enough with my taste to know that. So,
Unless you're new, and then in which case,
yeah,
welcome.
unless this is the first episode you've turned into, you picked this one to join.
And somehow haven't turned us off yet already too. No. Kat, what about you? What's your opinion? First impressions.
Oh, first impressions of this show were, hey, Miles is pushing a show called Lesbian Bear Storm. That seems like Miles.
Yeah.
First few episodes, I absolutely hated the show for the first few episodes. Like I said in the chat, this is a strong 2. I honestly can't get too far into my thoughts without spoiling a lot of things, but there's a lot of things that aren't presented as well as I would like them to be presented, and just because of that, I would not recommend this. Just because, like, sure, if you're like Miles and you're a sadistic person, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but I bring it up, and you can take with that what you will. But I would not shove this in your face. I think that if you are a person that seems to enjoy avant-gardeness for avant-gardeness sake, then sure. But other than that, no, I would not recommend it.
So you wouldn't endorse it, but you would mention it, maybe is a way to put
Maybe.
it. Okay. Interesting. All right, Pete, what about you?
Coming into this, I had like this preconceived notion that I wasn't going to like it just based off of the genres remind me of like Kill la Kill, which is something that I wasn't a huge fan of in general. So I was like, okay, I'm coming into this probably going to be a little biased and not enjoying what I like. In the first few episodes, I thought it was like okay. I was like, okay, is this like Attack on Titan? Like what's going on with these bears? Like what's the meaning behind the wall? Is this Wall Maria? Like what's going on? And as the show developed is when I fell more and more in love with it. But I think kind of having this preconceived notion coming into it that I would hate it I don't know. I feel like you need an open mind coming into this show. I don't think the genres listed do its service. It's a lot. And I thought this might be like kind of a dumbed down show when actually it was like, okay, this show's actually gonna throw like 70 metaphors at me. Can I understand all of them? And I think if you have that notion going into it, I think you'll like it. But I think for some other people, I understand why this is like a 7 on Mal. Like I completely get it. But first couple of episodes, would I recommend it? Yes, I would recommend it with the caveat of like letting people know, like, hey, ahead of time, it's going to be a combination of like 7 different shows throwing you 45 different things.
I find this hard. Like, who specifically in your mind do you first think of when you say, "Oh, I want to recommend this show to someone"?
Miles.
Like, it's hard. Fair. So, all right, second person.
Avant-Garde and lesbians. Miles?
Yeah. Plus, I guess that's my point. Like, I don't know. When I think of recommending, I don't think of recommending necessarily you guys. I think of recommending to a random person on the street, right? Or who are my friends, right? Like in of various backgrounds. Like, oh, would I recommend it to a friend that loves Attack on Titan? Hell no.
I think
right?
people
like, no,
that's like Madoka. If you're like a big Madoka
Mhm.
fan, I think you'd really like this.
Yeah, Madoka, Revolutionary Girl, Utena, for like some more popular things. Maybe even like Baka Monogatari a little bit.
A little bit.
Like, I think if you sort of like that sort of like one, I think like the art in this is just like unique enough in like parts that has like the walking scenes with like the interesting backgrounds and everything that are like pretty stapley, ironically enough, in like our typical avant-garde sort of art style shows. But like I mean I would recommend it to like, and like I of course have picked my friends to have similar interests to me, but there's a few friends I would recommend it
I'd
to.
recommend it to people
Admittedly-
who like my taste in anime.
Yeah.
No, I just think like, I would, if I took like my 10 normal or non super into anime friends, I'd recommend this to maybe 2 of them,
Sure.
like, but
That's
it's just, it's tough. It's the avant-garde, it's the, the lesbian and like, like the heavy focus on lesbian imagery and metaphors and things as well that makes it more difficult. It's different. It's a very different show than
I guess
what
like
a lot of people
speaking,
would expect.
I would say that we're like speaking to like our audience though, right? Like we have an audience that is at least in somewhat like entrenched into like anime culture and everything. Like presumably because they're watching an anime podcast. So like in that case, I mean that's who I'm talking to when I say I'd recommend it to it. You know what I mean? If you have a friend who's like, hey, just watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. It's my first anime ever. Big fan. What would you recommend next? I would say Psycho-Pass and not this.
Yeah.
Like, so.
You would say no other anime because apparently nothing's better than that one, right?
Oh,
Yeah, totally.
Frieren. I would say watch Frieren. It's the only one that's rated higher.
There we go. Hopefully 3 months from now, this episode isn't dated. But yeah, all right. Svea, you just heard him laugh. Haz, what about you? What are your first impressions?
Oh man, what a! I wasn't even, I'm not usually here,
Yeah,
but I saw, I saw the art, and when I went to do the thumbnail, the original thumbnail compared to the one you're seeing was very different because the screenshots crossed me up because I saw screenshots that looked like horror scenes. So I thought it was a horror anime, and then I did it, and then I looked, and I said, "Oh, I have to redo the thumbnail because it's not that." And then in that moment, I said, "This has to be peak," because it just crossed me up. You feel me? My ankles are broken. So I went in with high expectations. This had all the signs of a has hit. It was a 702, I think, or like 701, like almost perfect 7.
704.
As soon as I launched it, I mean, the first 2 minutes, I think I was just mind blown. I was out of this world. I saw everything from the Madoka Magica comparisons to the Bakemonogatari comparisons to just all this crazy. They had a class trial at the end of episode 1. It was great.
If you like Danganronpa, watch this.
Yeah, watch this.
There's bears and class trials.
It's literally trigger happy havoc. They have guns. So I went in with pretty good expectation, and they were blown out the water. I think what I will say about this show, though, and I think it speaks to what Kat was saying about presentation, is that this show is one of those shows that it really is tough because it doesn't look like you need to give it the attention that it needs. But I feel like the way it's structured, in that when you start it, you're in this world and you're going and you figure out the clues of the mechanics of it through, little bits of information that are dropped here and there, or through people actually using, whatever the systems are, and you have to piece it together. And so obviously when you look at the surface though, you're like, oh, this is just nonsensical stuff. So it probably, if you can't, like, despite appearances, I think, give it that attention, it probably will end up just being nonsensical. I mean, if you can't move past your initial judgment, sorry, because I think even in part 1, like, there's a lot there that's like, I was like, oh, this is clearly like a metaphor for something. Even the transformation scene, like, there's clear metaphors there, but you also have to go with that little bit of, the pinch of salt that's like, but this is a 7 on Mal. So I would recommend it. But if, like people have said, you're open-minded to accepting what is being presented to you and respecting it as it wants to be respected, despite your own preconceived notions.
Fair enough. Sweet. Yeah, and I am in the probably the most naysayer here, unless Kat's lower than me, but but at the end of the day, I am glad I watched the show. I think it is worth the time to have watched it. I had a great discussion with Miles before the show too, like hashing out some things, like making sure I didn't miss anything, like feeling confident that I got what the message of what the show was trying to do. I am not fully satisfied with where it ended up, so I guess that's why I am not sure I would recommend it. I I think, to me, my experience with this director was Sarazan Mai. It's a show that I watched seasonally a year and a half ago or whenever it came out. It was probably his most recent work as well. I enjoyed the hell out of Sarazan Mai. I didn't end up thinking it was perfect by any means, but I enjoyed the ride. It had very similar themes in terms of accepting people, naysayers in society or different people along those lines, right? And I resonated with Sarazan Mai a lot more than this show, so I think that's probably why I'm, I guess, lower on the spectrum. But I similar to other people, I'd recommend it specifically to people that really like this director or really like Utna, or Madoka Magica was another really good comparison. If someone says that they enjoyed that show, yeah, I think that they would also enjoy this one. But for someone like me, I was just a little. It was a little much at times as well for me, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in the next 30, 45 minutes. But yeah, perfect. Let's get into the spoilers. So yeah, if you haven't watched the show yet, give us a pause, or if you don't care, then keep listening. And yeah, why don't we get started? Miles, did you have that first talking point pulled up for us?
Yeah, so our first talking point, we're going to talk about just like the overall presentation that's in this show, sort of the stuff that gives it its avant-garde tag, right? So like there's a lot of art style stuff that does that. There's a lot of sort of the metaphors and I guess like mechanics, world building of the world that is definitely more out there than we normally see, right?
Yeah.
So how did everyone like that? Did it resonate with you? Did it not? Were some parts hit or miss? And Kat, we're going to start off on a low note, I think, and then we'll climb up that hill. So Kat, start us off.
So presentation for me, for the avant-garde-ness of the show, I kind of include the ecchi into it. And one of the things about it is like with using that as a means to portray their messages of like, well, one of their messages of woman being portrayed like in a lesbian light, being very promiscuous and trying to get a rise out of men, and all that stuff. Like, sure, I can understand that, but at the same time, it is also the fact that there are times where that does not even need to be in the situation at all. Like, there are times in the show where just somebody just gets like stripped immediately, and then like two scene or a scene later they are completely clothed again and nothing really happened. Or like the first 3 episodes where there's the trial and everything that happened, and then they're licking honey off of a lily in between the main girl's crotch. We don't need that. Like I like we don't need that. And that's the thing that I can't get behind, because it's like it stops me from being able to recommend it to people. And also it turns me off and makes me feel almost empty. It's almost like cathartic, but not in a good way. It drains me out of the show. That's why like about 4 episodes in, I've felt bored. It wasn't because there wasn't a lot of stuff going on. It was because it was too busy and I couldn't keep up, so I stopped.
You
Like
just didn't get the
that's
metaphor. You just didn't
yeah,
get it. You didn't get what the lily
sure,
was. The
sure.
lily with
I
the
didn't
honey between her legs. You didn't understand what the metaphor was, Kat. That's what it was.
look. If we want to talk about a metaphor, sure, I can make up a metaphor that's very, very like not safe for work. But I'd rather not get us all like taken off of YouTube. You know what I mean? So let's not go there.
You just didn't get it, buddy. It's okay. Sorry, continue. Did you finish your point? I didn't mean to cut you off, but you just didn't get the metaphor.
But like with the buildings and the way that the world looked, I if it I liked it, but it was kind of shrouded by everything else that was going on from the presentations of the characters, and I just couldn't. It just didn't feel. It didn't feel good to me. It didn't feel like it fit.
I guess for me, for like the avant-gardeness of the show, I thought they did a couple things really nice that really stood out to me. I think a lot of times when you see stories like this that try to put two people on like separate sides of, let's just say, love or whatever, sometimes it's like maybe like a biracial couple or something like that. We see that a lot in like Western media, or whether maybe it's like they're both, maybe they're like homosexuals or something like that, where like it's viewed as something different, but a lot of times it's played the same way. In this, it's like, they're using a bear as the other side of a human. And so it's like, how are you going to intertwine the story of humans and bears together in sort of a romantic setting? And I thought how they kind of like wove that together was very unique. We mentioned it in like the introduction as well. Sort of like the art styles remind me a lot of like the Madoka. The scenes that really stick out to me are like the running up the staircases with the background. I think how like the avant-garde style of like the art was done really well as well as that. Also just like how they portrayed murder in this show, I thought was really interesting, because at points it was serious. But a lot of times when it came with the bears, I was laughing. It's like shock, Kuma shock, and they have like them in like bear outfits, and it's like growl, growl, I'm eating you, growl, growl. It's so different, where it's like, okay, the main character's love of her life has just been murdered by bears, and now they are eating her, but I'm laughing. Like, how am I supposed to like take this? Like, how am I supposed to like understand this? And like, as the show went on, I think I gravitated to that style more. But like, I think the show just did so many like fun and unique things, whether it's art or dialogue or murder, that it had me hooked. I was a big fan of this style.
Great. And Pat, do you want to go?
Oh, well, yeah, I was gonna say I agree with Pete. The avant-garde art, specifically like the background art, was awesome. I really enjoyed a lot of the background art. The foreground art I wasn't as sold on. Like, it was very just fine. That it didn't, the character designs to me, other than like you said, with when they transform into the bears with the hands and paws and everything, like that was interesting. But other than that, I thought they were pretty samey, which I guess maybe was the point, right? Because they're trying to say something about society here, right?
We are us.
Yeah, we are us. We are society.
And us
Uh,
is capitalized in the subtitles.
there you go. I definitely am closer to Cat's side though, with a lot of the metaphors, or like like what we've talked about with we keep just saying avant-garde, but I guess there's no other real way to identify those specific things. So like I I am aligning with Kat on the sense that a lot of the various fan servicey moments and the some of the metaphors were just so on the nose, and it frustrated me. I don't know. I mean, I guess my biggest complaint with these metaphors is the whole point that the show is trying to make, in my perspective, and Miles and I talked about this, so maybe I'm misconstruing my point, but I believe the show is trying to say that lesbians or anyone that doesn't fit in with society is cast aside or viewed as the bears, right? And they are not welcome to society. They're persecuted. They're intentionally isolated. The reason humans in this world isolate the bears is because they fought a war with them, and because the bears kill and eat the humans. We see that that isn't always the case in this show. However, the way it is perceived, and like the fact that they mention the war and give society this excuse to blame the bears, justifies the actions of the humans, which is what frustrates me, because you could very easily, or they could have very easily done this same story and still had the bears be the bad guys if they showed, or even if they didn't show it until the end too, that oh, there were no bears actually involved in the killing or involved in that historical battle that separated them in the first place was made up. Like that. I guess like if they had done any of that, I would have felt more comfortable with that conclusion, or the message being that they were trying to display being actually displayed, because it is logical for the humans in this case to isolate themselves from the bears because the bears kill the humans, which of course is not the message. They were not trying to say that lesbians will kill society by any means. I know that's not what they were trying to say, but the way that it ends up being presented, it is how that's how I end up interpreting the story. Not interpreting it, but again, I understand they're not trying to say that, but the way it's presented which I think aligns with what Kat is saying, at least somewhat, where it frustrates me because it's stuff that could have been avoided or stuff that could have been fixed with just simple changes, minor changes to things that happen on screen, I guess. So, Miles, I know you had some response to this.
We're gonna go with Kat because I'm gonna like go through everyone's points and just like ask them to elaborate and stuff at the end here.
Mhm.
So has you hit us with what your thoughts are, and then I'll round robin everyone.
Yeah. So I was a huge fan of all this stuff. I think some of it was on the nose, but I think that in something that is as not, I feel like I was talking to Miles about this, where some of the mechanics of the world didn't make a lot of sense in the beginning, but the metaphor did. And I think that, that part of that is intentional because as you learn more about the mechanics, the metaphor becomes clear. And I think that that's why starting it with, like, I think, for example, the way they built up the boxes, I thought was really interesting because we see a lot of things go into the boxes before we know what I would say the message is. At least I did. It took a while for me. I was very confused, but there was a lot of focus on them. And like even the way they're structured, I at first thought was like, oh, it's a something about hierarchy, right? Because it's in a upside down triangle, and it comes to this point, and it's also a division thing. I thought stuff like that, like, yeah, at the end of it, it's on the nose, but damn, they built it up so well that, and to me, the avant-garde stuff, well, whatever you may consider that to be, obviously, because it's a pretty broad term, I feel like, especially when you're looking at something from 2015, you kind of have to put yourself in a different mode for that. It was really well done, and I think that as the story goes on, the way it's built up through essentially like the mechanics of it, right? Like the actual, how does these things work? What does the divide do, right? And how that builds the metaphor. It was great, personally.
Okay, Kat, I wanna sort of just like challenge some of what you were saying, right? So like I agree the etchy in this show is it's sometimes a little much, right? However, um a lot of the theming in this, right, it comes around in sort of like criticism of how, LGBT people, lesbians, etc., are faced in society, Japan, etc. So if you notice where the etchy scenes happen, like where the sexualization happens and everything, those scenes don't occur in public ever. They're in private or in like mental things, like
Yeah.
mental stages, like the trial and everything. Now, I'm not saying that you necessarily have to like the execution, because I agree, it was a bit much in my taste. But do you think that the purpose of it there in like that sort of staging is like it exists for a reason, right? Like I don't think it's completely fan service. I think it's to show maybe like even like a sexual liberation in private or in one's own mind space, because when they're at school you don't get any of that sexualization. As far as like the girls being stripped and stuff when things happen, I think that being stripped is very easily metaphorical, right? Like you're being laid bare in front of um I'm funny. Being laid bare, like in front of
Yeah.
people and everything, and so it's more of like a metaphorical stripping of someone, which is why they have clothes on again 3 seconds later. But it's
So-
showing that literally because that's just how the show presents itself.
So with that being said, sure, you can say that they are being laid bare, and I can understand that. But I still think that it's not like I still think that even though like those scenes are happening in mental scenes and mental situations, it still feels like because at the end of the day, like we're talking about like just woman and lesbian and LGBTQ and all these other types of like points that we're trying to get across here. It makes sense. But the issue that I have is that it's so jarring, and if you are watching and you're not ready to take that in, you're not going to take it well, like I didn't. Like, it's going to be a situation where your point doesn't get across because I didn't get that part until I talked with Pete. That wasn't a conclusion that I picked up off because I was smart. And like, I knew that there was some type of symbolism, but I couldn't figure it out. And it was because it was so shocking. It was so jarring. It was like, in my opinion, there was a point at which the avant-garde-ness of the show actually detracted from the points it was trying to make. Because
yeah.
like,
Do you-
that's how I felt.
Really quick, Kat, were you aware that the word Yuri also means lily in Japanese?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, that
That's very
might have
interesting.
helped pick. Yeah. Anyways,
That's funny given the way that lilies are usually used as well in metaphors.
that,
All right, either
that
way.
is yes.
Well, like in English media too, not just like
Oh,
Japanese. You know,
yeah.
like the flowers. I guess like Frida Kahlo, obviously being the big example, but like in general, flowers have always been used.
Georgia
To,
O'Keeffe.
fix that for me, Trent. Thanks. Yeah, totally. They were both feminists. I like feminist artists. I feel like I'm, like good on me for remembering them from art class from like 10 years ago. No, so I was going to argue like on Kat's behalf because this is how I felt about the fan service too. Like it's specifically the stripping scene, right? And I think that that's one of the better examples of it. But I felt this way about a lot of the fan service. And to be fair, like you said, it is mainly in private situations. Mainly, it's the bears that we end up seeing, naked or having these moments happen to them, whatever. To me, that strip moment where she rips the clothes off, could we not have just had it be where we see the clothes get ripped off, but we don't see her on the screen bare ass naked instead, and we would understand what was happening, because we would be able to, again, like Kat said, literally 2 frames later, like 2 scene switches later that are in the same moment. She's
Yeah,
fully clothed again. So that's where, like, to me, it's like you don't have to show me that, and that's where I think like a show, another avant-garde show. Good callback here, Pat. Thanks. Perfect Blue does not. There are very few moments where they show actual nudity in Perfect Blue, but there are a lot of very, very similar scenarios and situations that come up that are just artistically shot or shown differently that focus less on the sexuality of the or the sexual
Aspects.
like view of the scene and instead focus on what is actually the triggering things that are happening, the metaphor that, so to speak, that is happening as well in Perfect Blue. And of course, I guess it's not fair to compare something to Perfect Blue because it's one of the best movie animes ever made, but
yeah.
to
I
me,
would
it's like a
also
simple
say
fix.
there's a scene that's like in Perfect Blue that is much more nude and graphic than this, which has like a very similar point in it. I guess my argument would be that if you want to show or if you want to criticize the idealization of like purity of women in society, right? Like how often Japanese women in anime and stuff are compared to like perfect flowers and stuff. Having someone literally perform a sexual act on a flower is an interesting way to do that. I agree that maybe it's a little bit overdone. Like I think they missed the mark between artsy and sort of horny a little bit. Like they split
Yeah.
that difference too much. But I do think the idea is really interesting and worth exploring and not just purely made for a fan service reason, as we have things to say.
Yeah. So I think that similar to what you mentioned too, I think that the reason the nudity didn't really bother me, especially by the end of it, and I think it made perfect sense why they used it the way they did, is because there's a big thing towards the end about lust and love, right? And obviously I don't want to get too far into like the metaphor because that is talking point, but to some point, right? Whenever, like for example, the teacher, right? The teacher comes, rips off all the clothes, and they're naked, right? And then they're back to being clothed as soon as the person is found. And to me, that just is representative of this is not this is lust, right? But I think to your point about the line drawing, I think the difference between this show and something like Perfect Blue is that Perfect Blue very explicitly shows you this very hard scene and sort of this warped view of like sexualization and like, the idolizing the purity of people. But I think in this show, what they try at least is to show you from the perspective of the girl herself, at least this is how I took it, in that she's confused. She's learning about love, right?
Yeah.
She herself is sometimes led astray by lust under the assumption it is love, which is what causes a lot of conflict between what essentially causes the final like love like conflict, right? Like a lot of people misinterpreting their love for lust. And it's why in the last scene when she becomes a bear and like she approaches, right? She doesn't become naked. She appears in her clothes, and then obviously they join and conform. But first is her in her like clothes and like showing like I am gonna give this part of me to be like you.
Yeah, I loved that as like honestly, like I think in a world where we have so much Yuri bait, like actually having them have that like deep, meaningful connection and then also like a physical connection where they kiss and it's like passionate is I think very good. Pete, I want to speak to something that you said because I watched Elemental with my wife and child today,
Oh, nice.
which is a Pixar movie that came out recently and it was very good. However, like they do like a similar sort of like two worlds that can't mix thing, but they use like literally fire and water. And so you were pointing out how like unique bears and humans were. And I think like I love that and I think you love that, but I do think that sort of like contributes a little bit to the frustrations maybe that like Kat and Pat have because it's not something that you ever can tie together in like a neat little box. So one, I guess I would like to hear your thoughts on that, Pete. Like, do you like that it's maybe not as tidy as possible? Because I enjoy that. And then if Pat or Kat want to talk about that as well, like a differing opinion of that, and I'm assuming your opinion, but if you do share that or don't, let me know.
Yeah, I think that the bears could be replaceable with like any animal or something along those lines. I just think like how
Platypus.
Sure, why not?
Okay.
Yuri Plata Arashi, run it. I think like there are shows like Beastars where they do the thing where it's like herbivores and carnivores and they're like supposed to like not mix together. I think like that's like a cool idea, but like at the end of the day, they're all like anthropomorphic animals or whatever. Like they're all in that same realm. This is just like they're literally bears. Like they have to use magic to transform into like girls, but like they are bears at the end of the day, and that is so far away from being a human that how they like how they mix it together is like what really got me into the story, because I'm like, how the hell are they going to like get from exploding star that mutates bears into high school girls into a love story? How are they going to get to that point? And they did. I mean, it's like one thing that I love about anime is like take the medium allows you to take risk and allows you to do something different than say live action. And when you do something unique, that's kind of like a point of where I gravitate towards in story. And this is so unique of like a romance representation story that just like I fell in love with it.
Yeah, that's great. And so Pat and or Kat, and we didn't plan this out, so one of you can go first if you're not. But like, do you think that like that lack of complete cohesion, like, because you were pointing out some issues with the metaphor, right, Pat? So like,
I can go. I can touch on that. Yeah, because again, I kind of already just talked about it, but like my main complaint with the metaphor is that it does not work in the way that it's trying to say. The commentary that it's trying to make about society. So like the commentary that it's trying to make is that lesbians existing or being welcomed in society and not being part of the inclusion, right? Not getting excluded, not being shunned away. They don't belong being shunned away because they're not dangerous. They're not going to destroy things. They're not a potential harm for humans and or for society, so to speak, right? And it's the same again. They're using lesbians as the or women in this like I don't know, yeah, lesbians is the right word. They're using lesbians in this story as the metaphor for just people in society in general, and of course that does include lesbians who are shunned, but anyone who isn't part of the norm in society. The reason that society shuns these people away normally, or the only justifiable reason, is if the majority of society is endangered by them. Same reason why you shun murderers, pedophiles, weirdos, right? Like that don't contribute to society and that endanger the mass. Obviously, that's not what lesbians do, But in this story, the bears, who are the lesbians, are seen as dangers, and of course, there's the false flag. There's the wolf whistle aspect of that too. That you see with the way people talk about lesbians in our society. It's fucked up, but it's what they do, right? They're impacting our youth. They're warping their minds. Whatever bullshit that right wing or conservative people spew. But like in this specific metaphor and in this story, the bears do kill people, so they kind of should be shunned or feared in some way, which is why I get so frustrated because, and do the bears kill more bears than humans? Yeah. But do the humans know that? No, they just see their classmates getting picked off one by one, and the bears are being blamed for it. They aren't always correctly blamed for it, like the correct people or whoever. But it was the bears at the end of the day, which is why I was so frustrated at the end when it's like they could have very easily done it differently by not having specifically the bears be the killers, or not having that war background that set up the story in the first place, right? That set up that split and that divide, the war between the bears and the humans that started. That could have just been propaganda or something made up intentionally by society to divide them. And then there's your excuse there. I don't know. That's where I just got so frustrated with it, because I wanted, if the metaphor made sense or was like what I guess what we've talked, wrapped up in a box and perfect, right? Then I would have liked it a lot, I think, because I think it's a proper message, and it was the message he was trying to send. But I personally found the metaphor to not work because of, I guess, all the stuff that I just said about society rightfully shunning murderers in this case, or people that are viewed as murderers.
Personally, for me, piggybacking off of what Pat said, it's not about the bears. Like, the bears could be anything, like Pete said. I don't care about bears. Could have been cats, could have been dogs, could have been anything. I don't give a shit. The issue that I have is the fact that it was a war. Because you want to know the first thing that I thought that symbolism was for, that confused the shit out of me? I thought the whole wall was about the Berlin Wall in East and West Germany. I didn't understand that. That's where I just couldn't, like, and maybe I've missed a few lines that were critical. I don't know if I did or not. I was paying attention, and I couldn't really get into it. But the thing is, if it was a little bit more cut and dry, I don't think it would have been like, specifically the war part. It would have been easier to link the two, and I guess. And playing a little bit of devil's advocate, I could see there being a little bit of a war there with, like, say, Marsha P. Johnson and Stonewall, which could make sense feasibly. But that's a callback that not everyone's going to get. And even as a person who understands that historical context, I didn't get it. And it confused me more, and I didn't get the plot until I talked to someone else. So maybe this is propaganda to have a conversation about anime. Maybe this is trying to get you into a community. Welcome to the What Do You Say Anime. Our link to our Discord is somewhere. But you see what I mean, man. It frustrated me.
Well, I guess, what I'm going to say, Kat, is that if you've consumed any, like, Yuri content before, I think it's almost impossible to miss. And this isn't me trying to blame you for missing it, because if you lack that context, it's for sure missable. But, like, the lilies being everywhere and stuff, in my opinion, at the very least, makes it, like, super duper clear what's happening here. Pete, you had stuff to say, so you go ahead, and then we can go from there.
Well, no, I think I kind of, like, agree and disagree with what Pat was saying, because, like, I think the war, to me, that's not the big deal with, like, the issue. It's the why they're eating them after they get through the wall was my problem, because, like, we've gone to war with countries before, and then 20 years later we're cool with that country. Like, that's not my issue. Like, that, like, I can get why you go to war with somebody and then a couple of years later you're cool, but, like, the fact that, like, Ginkgo came over the wall and then like I get like why she killed the person, but like I thought that was like out of
killer.
what? Oh, I mean, like she could have stopped it, but she didn't. You know,
It's different than killing someone. But
okay,
yes.
she watched a murder happen that she could have prevented. Sorry, she essentially killed somebody.
I also agree, because like even then, if you use that defense in this case, that's still one of the bears being, you know, for one, it was another bear that was killing a human, or well, what we thought was a human that turned out to be literally fucking God for some reason.
Mhm.
But then also the bear still did not do the right thing for
Yeah.
society, right? So that's where it still suits my argument. I want to make it very clear. I suppose, like, I'm not on that. Oh yeah, the lesbians are what's wrong. You know, they belong being the bears in the situation. It's more just the use of the bears did not align with the message it was trying to say. I know you get that. I just want to make myself clear.
Yeah, I think I get that too. I think it is like a miss on the show. I just think that they did so many other messages so well that I'm willing to let this one thing that I don't get slide type of thing.
If it wasn't the main point of the show, I would agree. It's like, my problem.
Because I think it's important to. Sorry, Haz, do you want to go and then I can go?
I was just going to ask, I guess, because this is a part 2 that I'm not necessarily sure about. So, and I think it will help the conversation to the point of whether or not the whole thing was propaganda. So they have the whole story about Princess Lulu, right? And in that story, the bears see the starfall, which doesn't really make sense with the human story, I feel like, because in the human story, they saw the things fall, and that's what caused everyone to be violent. But it seems as though the bears were already fully sentient and capable of what they were doing before the thing ever fell. I don't know if maybe it's clarified and I missed something, but I do think that whether or not the war, I think personally, the war happened, and whatever the reason was, it doesn't really matter, because it never matters. It's what matters is that people at the end of it felt the way they felt about each other, right? And that there's this big message about, right? I think the reason they eat after they get over the wall is to that point of lust and love, and to the point of what you were saying, where like God shows up, right? Essentially, she is the person in this entire thing. So back to the boxes, right? This is the world we're in is essentially her box. I feel like to some extent,
box?
Right? Where she has all these things she loves, right? The humans and the bears, right? And to the point of when they sort of keep things in the box, right? When she says at the end, you keep things in the box, they just wither. It's not the same thing as interacting with them, right? So the war happens, and I think at the end of it, both sides don't know what love is. At least that's how I interpreted the story, and they're going based on these ideas of this God that they have followed, and like eating. It's not bad to the bears. It's their way of showing love. You know what I mean? Which is why I think that after they come over, it's why they keep eating. I don't think it necessarily destroys the metaphor. I think to some extent, what they're trying to say is that, and this is not my take, this is my opinion on the author's take, that on both sides, there's been some miscommunication about what love is, and that both of their ideas, right, are wrong to each other. And that creates conflict when truthfully it doesn't matter, right? And it's why when the pair eventually comes in and they're together, they're no longer walking down, they're walking up and out of the walls and the box that were created by God. So that's my interpretation of that war stuff. Like, I don't think the reason that the war really happened ever is truly explained. I think it's an unreliable narrator, but yeah.
No, completely. I agree about the war thing too. It's just like, that's like an example though, where it's like that could have been, you know, figured out in the story that the God tells at the end, or is it God, or is it not Karena? Kareha? Is that her name? Kareha eventually tells at the end. And I also do think, to just again, not to knock it again, but like that story, and then also the story that her mother was trying to tell, and then also the story that we hear from God, and like there's a lot of these like narrator different moments that happen that in my eyes, got very confusing for me to try and keep track of. Maybe that's because I was, watching it all in one day. Probably doesn't help, I guess. But like, also, it just felt it did overwhelm. Like, I guess to go back to Kat's original point too, there was so much going on that it did get overwhelming at different points for me. So maybe that's also why I was
I think
struggling.
Kureha is overwhelmed though, and some of that is intentional because you're hearing similar stories that have a different point of view from multiple sources and all of that. What I'll say about like the war thing is that I think it's important to note that like Ginkgo and Lulu like didn't fit in with the bears, quote unquote, right? So I think it's like my interpretation of it after our talk, Pat, is that like the bears, people who are like outside of society and stuff, is like too inclusive of a group. It's not bears that are the issue inherently. Some bears are problems, but some people that are deemed problems for society are not at all the issue, but they're still lumped in with bears, so to
That's fair.
speak. So in this case, society is judging, these girls for their like love of the same gender the same way that they would judge a murderer or something, even though that's not necessarily in there. I also think that there's like some commentary about the need for minorities to be perfect and act as like perfect representations for their group or without acting as like you have instances where if someone who's in an out group does something bad that anyone could do at any point, right? And obviously in the stakes of the show, it's letting someone get murdered, which is actually a bad thing. But like whatever it would be in this case, the entire group gets blamed for that. And so I think there's like a lot of that going on in like this story and stuff too. To me, like at the end when Kureha decides to be a bear, what she's deciding is that she's going to be herself, even if society deems it as bad, because there's like the exclusion ceremony, right? So like, and to me, what it's like being a bear in this case isn't actually being a bear; it's being someone who is excluded by society, and so even though they haven't done anything wrong, they are being excluded. And even if there are instances where it is okay to exclude these bears, the fact that it is being applied incorrectly across all people makes it bad. And that's sort of what we see at the end, where you have them very peacefully holding hands, being in love, and still getting shot. So, like, that was my take on it. Like, I don't necessarily even know if bears are like just lesbians, if that makes sense. But that like
That's what they are in the show. In my opinion, that's what they are in the show. But like you said,
well,
it's meant to
I'm
be
just saying like
people
even in the
society.
show, I don't necessarily know if that's 100% true. Because we see male bears, for example. Like, so like if it's people who are outcast in some way, and then a subsection of that outcasted group that is grouped together by society at large as people who are not allowed includes lesbians or whatever, then you have this issue where you're judging people as like incorrectly or whatever, because like I mean historically, like you mentioned murderers and like pedophiles, right? Gay people have been thrown in with pedophiles as a form of propaganda against them historically for like a very long time. People who attack children, yada yada yada. And like I think that is sort of the messaging that it's like trying to give here. I think that everything in this is a bit ethereal and metaphoric, and like maybe if you boil down the exact actions, it falls apart a little bit. But I don't think that's how you're supposed to engage with it, if that makes sense.
I think that's fair. I think that even if you weren't supposed to do that, there is a way that they could have made it possible for you to do that and not have it be a problem, which is where I got, like that's why I'm like, I guess it's nitpicky, but it's picking on this because to me it dismantles the whole argument of that message by having 1/8 of the bear characters that we meet be psychotic murderers that rather than like you said, and I do agree that that is a good point that pedophiles and gay, queer, whatever people have been lumped together because of again like political reasons. Like if the whole message is that that doesn't represent them or isn't meant to represent them, then not making one of the characters that is supposed to represent that group be a murder again, I guess not an accomplice, but like in this case, one psycho murderer, one that witnessed a murder. You know, like again, like a majority of the show is based around these people dying and vanishing and being blamed. Like that's where I guess for me, I just
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is you're not supposed to lump bears together. Like that's the point, to not lump the bears together. The bears aren't a cohesive group. That's a thought. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot going on in this show.
there is well again, there's so much going on. It's hard to say for sure. And you know, there are bear like you said, there's the bear. The two of them do get excluded from the other bears in the groups. Who knows if those bears were good or not? You know, no one knows because we don't explore that specifically, right? So it's weird to it's hard to know. I brought up Kiritsugu from Fate Zero in our talk about society, you know, because like that show I think asks a very similar question about society too, where it's like, oh, when does the greater good, the sacrifice for the greater good, become not as good as like holding your morals or holding your own? I think that that's a very similar argument that is the counter argument to what this show is trying to say about society, you know. And I think that it's very interesting to see like where you align in those.
Let's talk about other things on this show.
Cool.
Yeah, fair enough.
What did I guess like just general things that we liked about it? Like I thought the characters were fun. I liked the court members. I thought they were interesting.
One thing that really stood out to me, you know, with this selection process, to me, I kind of viewed it as, you know, they're singling somebody, they're voting on somebody to like single out. Kind of,
Yeah.
for me, at some points, it felt like just for the sake of it, like
Because they have to,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah.
so it's just like sometimes they're just like singling out people because they did one minor thing wrong and it didn't align with the core group's ideals. And if you're not, you know, it's like if you're not with us, you're against us, even if it's something minor. I feel like that's kind of like a representation of things that happened since this did take place in high school, sort of like in high school too, where it's like you have your cliques. If you don't do everything like what the clique does, then you're excluded from the clique and then we single you out and then maybe you're bullied or something along those lines. I thought that representation was really cool. I also like when they started like picking new leaders because they died, but like the new leaders of the Invisible Storm sort of like changed how they talked, and that was like representative, I feel like, of like what's trendy. So like the last girl who was leading the Invisible Storm was like, oh my god, no way, like that's so cool.
Yeah, like
and like
the really hard Cali accent,
Yeah,
like,
and, like,
SoCal.
the other girls didn't talk like that, but like now that she's popular, that's what's in. And I thought like that was kind of like an interesting way of like, oh, okay, are we, you know, like, okay, this is what's hot now. So now we're all talk like this. If you don't, we're gonna single you out. So I was a big fan of like sort of like I want to say it's like just like girl drama, but I guess from my high school experience, that's where it revolved around. But like, you know, the clickiness of like high school girls and like singling out people because of they're different or they look different or they act different. And I just thought that was represented in a really interesting way in the show.
Yeah, well, they form their group by excluding people based on their differences instead of including people based on like their similarities, right? Like that's sort of the deal that they go through. And I really like that too. Kat, say something nice about the show.
Sure. I'll say something I like about the show. So one of the main things I liked about the show was actually the ending. Well, the second half of the show, mainly about the main story. It was by itself, like removing all the extra stuff with symbolism and all this stuff, and just looking at it as a face value story from what it's trying to tell. It was a fairly, compelling story because I mean, it was ostracizing most people or ostracizing people depending on what they liked or depending on what they did, and at the end dying for what they believe in. And I did like that about the story. That's what kind of helped me get through the second half. That's why I'm as high on it as I am right now. I was going to say some criticism, but we're going to be nice right now.
A thing I liked about the ending was showing how their example of like being themselves like carried on, even if they were gone from that like area, like that they still had a demonstrable effect on the world. And I think it shows like the importance of representation, like in media and just in life in general. The people seeing like-minded people and knowing that they could be happy is important.
I was a big fan of the species divide judges. Not for any particular like reason about their metaphor or anything, but I just thought they were such a lovable cast of characters who injected humor pretty regularly throughout the show, and they were really fun. Shout out
Shabba
Sexy,
dude.
but cool is a narc. Cool said, and I quote, the rules are cool in the sub. I don't know if he said that in dub.
Yeah,
but
he did say something
He did
along
say
those
that in dub.
lines.
You did.
absolute fucking loser.
Yeah.
I really liked the voice acting in particular. We've kind of hinted at it, like talking about things like that. But I assume the sub was good. I didn't like that, but I thought that I found that annoying. But at the end of the day, that's like part of the bit and cool, whatever. The skillfulness of the voice acting, though, was very apparent. They definitely chose proper people to dub this, I guess is the right way to put it. They did an awesome job. All the roles did too. Like every person had a great voice actor or actress, I should say, in this case. Like again, I feel like I've been somewhat negative, but still positive about certain things. Again, I like the message that they are going for about being inclusive to people in society. How you shouldn't lump together people. I do like that message as well. And yeah, I guess I already talked about it a little bit, but the background art I think was awesome. I don't think the foreground art was that great. I don't think, or I don't think it was bad, but it didn't stand out. Character design, same thing. I didn't feel that like attached to them, but the background art was beautiful in almost every scene. I thought.
The scene where Ginkgo and Mitsuku are walking together on a stairway, and then Ginkgo sort of like toughens her resolve, and it splits
So
the stairway
cool.
by like shifting the perspective in the background. I thought was amazing.
Yeah, that was
Like that was a really
That
cool
was-
background art instance.
Absolutely. All right. So yeah, Miles, why don't you start us off with your final thoughts?
Yeah, I loved this. I thought it was great. I think that there's so much stuff that we didn't even get to touch on because it's just packed. So like, it seems like that's been a plus and a negative for people. It had so much stuff that to be overwhelming, but I loved being overwhelmed. I thought that was great. I liked having to like consider all of these things and stuff and just think about each scene. Like there's like the storybook metaphors that we've barely touched on. We barely got into like the invisible storm, like we talked about it a bit, but there's like a lot to delve into there. Like the entire show is sort of just like layers of metaphors of varying degrees. Some of them are like very obvious. Like, I mean, they just come out and say it. But like some of them are interesting. I really like the characters. Lulu is best girl, worst sibling, but she was very likable. She was very funny. I thought she was a cheerful presence in a world where people were pretty angsty. She did betray Ginkgo, but that's okay. I liked her, and I liked the picture of her and Ginkgo eating the salmon that they got to prove they were bears. That was very funny.
It was very funny. It was cute.
I love this director, so I don't think it's like a huge surprise that I love the show. Like there are Utena references with like the endless staircase. There's like references to Psycho and stuff in this I've seen, which is cool. I think it's a cool show, and I like pop culture references. And there's more to it than that. I think the messaging is very good and on point. I gave this a 10. I'm like a huge fan of it. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, big 10 for Miles. Kat, what about you?
Okay. So my final thoughts for the show are I know what the saying of the score I'm about to give it is, but I don't think the show was bad. It was definitely avant-garde, and I don't think the avant-gardeness of it was bad per se. But specifically in the second half is where the show shines, in my opinion. It felt like the show was sucking you in with the overall story in the second half, but unlike, say, Sunny Boy, it felt like the show was trying to suck you in and repel you at the same time. At least that's what it felt like to me. And because of that, it kind of felt, plus all of the other things that it was trying to touch inside of the show all together, it felt like it hit the mark, but it was shooting a shotgun, and it felt like it was all over the place, and I couldn't keep up. And because of that, I feel like if it had taken some things out, or not necessarily taken some things out, but if it like calmed down a little bit. Like, I'm not saying take the whole entire feeling of you being overwhelmed away, but like just calming down, reining it in just a tiny bit. I think it would be a vast improvement. But without it, I think it's a 4.
And your best girl.
Personally, my best girl is probably going to be Yuri Ha's mom, or Kuri Ha's mom.
Okay, Korea's mom. Oh, she's awesome. Yeah, she's great.
Yes.
Next up, right? Pete. What about you? What do you think?
So one thing that this show that does well that I want to compare it to is Fooly Cooly, where that's sort of avant-garde and has this, like allegory for like puberty. But like even if you didn't catch that, the show itself was still like a really fun ride. I think that this show kind of did that as well, where even if you weren't catching every single metaphor, you weren't catching every like message it was trying to send, I think that the show was still like an absolute ride. But for me, I love the messaging that I was trying to send. I thought the end was absolutely perfect, where you saw Korea, her initial wish was to make the bear become a human, but at the end, instead of like trying to make other people conform to us, we should really just like do what we want. And her becoming the bear, I thought was like perfect. And I thought like that was just like such a great message. It was everything I wanted from it. Best girl's Lulu. I thought she was just so funny and such, I don't know, just everything she does, like talking in third person, made me crack up. And I know Pat didn't like the growl growls, but I love the growl growls. I was a huge fan. Love the messaging of, this director does a lot of like queer representation, LGBT representation, and I thought it's very important that we have these style of shows in our medium and that we consume them and try to understand the message that the director is trying to send. And I think I got it, and I'm a huge fan. I thought the show was absolutely brilliant from start to finish, but like after like episode 3, I was like fully on board. The music was great, the voice acting was incredible, the messages were just everything I wanted. There's really not a whole lot of negative things for me to say about the show. I'm giving this a 10. We went through shows that came out in 2015, and this would have been my anime of the year for 2015. I thought this was just an absolutely incredible journey, and I'm so happy that Miles saw it on a trivia bot or whatever, because I probably would have never watched the show if that wasn't the case.
We would have never watched.
Yeah, so this was just honestly, this is probably like a top 5 watch club show for me. I absolutely love this show.
Okay. Miles. What about you? That's a first.
That's evil work. That's absolutely evil work.
It's our vibe, dude. It's like
the human echo, man. Or wait, you don't know what that is anymore, right? After you,
yeah, I gave it up.
You
he
guys
can't talk about it. No, it's worse than that. He knows what it is, but he can't talk about it.
That's true. That's true. All right. So, but what are your thoughts on human echo?
My no,
You broke
That's
us.
evil.
I broke him. Sorry, my fault. My fault.
So I really enjoyed this show. This show is great. I'm still thinking about boxes. Boxes are going to be my main metaphor. I'll figure out later on what they all mean, but the boxes mean a lot. Pay attention to the boxes, team. Don't get trapped in a box. Interact with the things you love, And much like I'm interacting with the things I love here by boosting this score with a fucking 10. This shit is a crack cocaine 10 out of 10. It has all of the great things from shows that I love that are good, and it has all the entertainment value of the shows that I like that are entertaining. It's amazing, and there's still stuff to think about right now, and that's always fun to just go on and think about something. Not many anime do that. A lot of anime say what they have to say and leave it at that, but there's so much detail here, even in the metaphor. I think you could just continue to visit and learn some stuff from this. My best girl is Life Sexy because
Actually
Life Sexy.
genderless, so
Well, they refer to them as he in the Mal, but
Oh, well,
you
that's
never
wrong.
know.
They are genderless characters.
Well, they are my favorite person.
There we go.
Shout out them, Shabba Dabba Doo. That is the sexy way.
Speaking of them, and for my my closing thoughts, I mean they were fun characters, but like what was their whole point? What was their purpose? I felt very frustrated and confused by them and their purpose in the storytelling. That whole thing was very frustrating to me, and maybe we'll talk about it afterwards and I'll like it more. But I just was so frustrated by their inclusion because it didn't they had some powers, but it didn't feel like they had all the powers. Were they the judges of the wall? But they still snuck through the wall. So there was just stuff that frustrated me on that aspect a lot. What else? Oh, Mitsuko, or Yurizono, the one who embodies lust in the end. She just fuses with
Ginkgo?
Ginkgo at some point in the show. And that just happens. Like I don't know. I think that, and again, if you love that, perfect. The show is perfect for you. I like logic. Logic is nice. Things making sense. I think I've said that before. I like it when things make sense. This was just too avant-garde for me to really rally behind it entirely, which is where I think my frustrations come from. My best girl, I think, was also Lulu. I enjoyed her dialogue, and her voice actress really just had a ton of fun with the role, I think, which made her character a lot of fun.
Her
Uh,
English dub voice actress is in the show that we're watching next week and plays a pretty pivotal role, and she's amazing in that as well.
I
So,
can't wait to listen to her again. But anyways, yeah, so I guess the way I looked at my final score was I think I ended up somewhere at like a 6.5, but I still liked Sarazan Mai more. I think I got behind Sarazan Mai's message better, more, which generally speaking, it's the same as this. This director seems to, Makoto Shinkai it a bit and tell the same story over and over again with just different like twists to it or different themes maybe. I felt I aligned with Sarazan Mai a lot more, and I also enjoyed it more throughout. Maybe that's because it's a little bit more toned down than this one was. It's a little easier for me to relate to some of the characters, I guess. So that's why I think I have to settle with a 6 on this show. Again, I would recommend it a lot more than a lot of the 6s I have, though, is the way I would phrase that. I'd be more likely to recommend it than almost any other 6 I have. It's just not for me. It's the same way with Kaiba. It's just not for me. And I can recognize that. So yeah, why don't we talk about what we're watching 2
Well,
weeks from
what's our
now?
score?
Our final score. Yeah, I did it in my head already, and I put it down. We averaged out to an 8.0 exactly, which is just under 1 whole point higher than Mal has it averaged out to, which I'm shocked it's this high on Mal almost because I feel like a lot of people would start the show that are just like monkey brain and just don't care, that would give this like a 3 and drop it, after 2 episodes, So I'm always surprised that I remember when we were watching it or first started it, I messaged Miles. I was like, why is it so low on Mal? It's this director. And then it like occurred to me like it's because people aren't going to pay attention to it, or aren't going to like give it the due time that it needs. And I don't know, it's hard. It's a really hard show to watch too, I guess, as someone who gave it a 6 instead of a 7.04. There we go. So 7.04 was the original score. We gave it an 8 aggregate. Probably our most diverse range of scores between like 5 members at least, right? Like that's a pretty wild.
a range of 6 is pretty crazy.
We were normally like 3 or 4 at most.
I mean, with Haz's on here, it's like if her flag breaks, where the range is maybe 7.
Yeah, that's a bit of a stretch one though.
The space dandy had a range of 5, which is
also pretty big. That one was a big one.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, there we go.
Cat, notorious hater.
Yeah, not as big of a hater as Miles, but yeah.
I gave this a 10.
Gave
Yeah,
a show
Miles
a 10.
a
No, yeah,
hater?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Of
a
course,
hater of other things.
A
That's just
Bochi
not
the
show.
Rock for sure.
Gave Bochi the Rock
we talked about that today. Miles and I did in our discussion that like maybe we don't like this, or I don't like the show as much because we can't relate or whatever. Yeah, like just like with
Miles,
Pochi.
I need you to not ever shave your head, please.
Sure.
That was
Like,
also a conversation from earlier today. Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that
Was it?
does.
Okay, I missed that.
Yeah, in general, talking about shaved heads or something. I don't know. Yeah, Yuri Bearstorm. That's that for Watch Club for us. Thank you for listening. So now, Miles, what are we watching and then discussing on January 8th? So once you get back from the Capitol that weekend, what are you going to be? What is your plan?
I'm not gonna lie. Fight back. Right?
I mean,
It's not Cooper's first time. He's got to go, right? Like, surely.
I just lesbian bear storm the Capitol. Yeah, I think anyone listening to this episode could probably figure out my politics from it.
I almost feel bad that the people can't figure out mine.
we'll leave it to that.
They would have me up here if our political views were not the way that they are.
My lord. Okay, so earning its Jesus Christ first legacy point is in third place is Sui Tama, the fishing show. In second place, and I gotta say, word up to Haz for voting right at the end here.
That's why you want him to vote,
dude. He voted for it. It just it happened to square out. Is Uma Musume Pretty Derby, and I wanted him to vote because he's participating in the show today.
That's fair, but I'm also upset.
Earning its third legacy point. It's getting there, and then in first place we have Cautious Hero. So we will be watching Cautious Hero.
Awesome.
An isekai. We've done like a surprisingly low amount of isekais, I feel like.
I think a lot of us have already watched it, like a lot of isekais, so we don't end up nominating it because like a lot of us have already seen it. And
also,
to be fair, in this case, 4 of us have seen the show already, if not 5,
I think
right?
So.
Here, at least. So, but I'm excited to watch the dub because I've heard the dub for this is awesome.
Also, hot take: isekais suck.
Wow, what a hot take. Oh, better put that on Twitter, my man.
I don't go on Twitter.
Yeah, there you go. All right, yeah, well that's what we're watching, and I can't wait to discuss it. I loved that show. That was a lot of fun. Why don't we discuss our nominations then for, I believe this will be the 22nd of January. That's when we'll be recording this. But yeah, so what are we nominating for Watch Club?
So Lesbian Bearstorm had almost a straight 7 on Mal and 100,000 members. I'm going to go with a 7.1 on Mal and half as many members. I'm going to nominate Planet Whiff.
That was my Secret Santa show last year.
I was going to say, that was a Secret Santa, wasn't it? Yeah.
And it is also it's a mecha kind of like Fully Cooley.
Not even close. It's more like Power Rangers.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
Power
I'm still
Rangers.
voting for it, probably.
I like Power Rangers.
And Mecha.
Yeah.
I like
I was
Mecha.
trying to remember what you said.
I'm neutral on Mecha, I think.
You're high on a lot of Mecha shows.
I'm high on the political Mecha shows. I'm not high on them.
90% of them.
I know. I don't care about the
This does not look like one of them, though, I will say.
Fair enough. All right, Pete, what have you got? So the show that I want to nominate not only has 3 seasons of content, but announced today is receiving a theatrical feature film. It was a show that when I put it up on the YouTube poll, it received 55% of all votes. I am nominating Uma Musume Pretty Derby.
I was always like a big fan of like a community vote poll. Like I've always pushed for that. But now seeing that they align with you, Pete, I think we might want to reel it back in.
I can't do it this week or this time because YouTube and Twitter only limit it to 4 shows and we have 5. So there's no community vote this time around.
I was gonna ask too, like you should try putting a different show in the first voting slot because a lot of YouTube bots.
You don't think I also thought of that?
I know. I'm just saying that's maybe that's why.
I will say there was a period of time that Cautious Hero was in the lead.
It was
for a pretty good point of time because I would like click to see what was.
You
winning.
voted for it. Just say it.
I didn't vote for it. I actually didn't. because last time I did it, like not that many people voted for it, and you called me out, so I like unvoted everything.
Fair enough. All right, Haz. Oh boy, we got Haz on an episode, which means we get a Haz nomination. What is
We do
Haz
get-
gonna nominate?
We do get a Haz
Crawling
nomination.
Love. Sorry.
Oh, that would have been a good one, but I
Okay.
feel like we got to work there, you know. So
We've been
I'm.
there.
Well, you know, we gotta. There's ups and downs. We gotta keep the curve nice and smooth. I am gonna go with the show that I've nominated before, I believe, and if I haven't, in my memory, I have. So the agenda is strong. Invaders of Raku Jima.
Oh, yep, you have.
Mm-hmm.
I know because it
battle
sounds
royale.
amazing.
Yeah, between an alien princess, a magical girl, a ghost, a guy, and a generic girl. That's it. That's all they
What a
describe.
description. That's a great description of it, Haz.
All for property rights.
Man smoking beans.
I love you, Haz. One, this is by Studio Silverlink. Two,
same studio. There we go.
two, this is Comedy Supernatural Harem School. I just feel like that screams Haz so much.
That does scream Haz. Miles, do you have a nomination?
I do. I'm going to be nominating "O Maidens in Your Savage Season."
Let's
or in the
go. Based Miles.
Disappointed.
Haz, you'll probably like it.
It's super
Is
fun. It's really fun.
Is this the one that you try to get me to watch, Pete, or was that March comes in like a
I
line?
definitely have recommended this show multiple times.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see.
Definitely. Yeah.
I think the one that Pete tried to get you to watch, what's the comedy one, Pete?
Asobi-
that you
Oh,
like?
also be Asabase.
Yeah, I would suspect that's the one.
Is that the one where they all like have this like book club thing, and it's a bunch of girls in the first episode. It's it's school centered. No.
Yeah.
Oh, every anime?
Yeah. No, it's. I don't want to spoil it because it's a cool show. It's fun.
Bet.
All right, sweet. We won't spoil it then. I'm gonna nominate a classic here, something that we
Okay, Crawling Chaos. Sorry.
yeah. No game, no life. Yeah, no. I would like to do. It's a movie, but I think there's multiple movies of this that continue the series. So I would like to suggest maybe 2 or 3 of them because 3 of them are out now. Apparently, that's Princess Principal. I feel like just one movie would be
We
like
can
fine.
legally watch 2 of them. They're also like 50 minutes long, so 2
They're
or
then-
3 is like fine.
I would say, yeah, if they're only 50 minutes long, then especially would think that we'd want to do more than just the first one.
This is an old ass call.
Yeah, this is our second show that we ever did for Watch Club. So as we approach, what would this will be 3 full years of doing
Something
Watch
like
Club,
that.
entering our 4th year.
Yeah,
I
movie
would
1
love-
is 53 minutes long, and I believe because I've watched the first 2 because they're on High Dive. And
Oh,
movie 2 is
is-
55. So
Ah. So we could definitely do it, and then
Yeah,
let's see how
that's
long
fine.
movie 3 is.
Is movie
It
3
aired.
out?
It aired in April of
yes, movie
2023.
3 is out, but not on anything we could legally watch it on.
I mean, if it's on like 9 anime, then sure, that's fine.
Okay, cool.
Then sure,
Then-
let's do
yeah.
the first 3 movies then, because we're still waiting for number 4, right? Isn't there 4?
There's gonna be 6 total.
There's
Yes.
6 total.
Yep.
Holy shit, we are so lucky to get 6 total Princess Principal movies. But yeah, so I guess I'll do just those first 3 Princess Principal movies. So I don't know, you can just put the first one and indicate it.
Yeah.
That way. But sweet. All right, I guess that wraps up our nominations. Thank you guys again for listening. And yeah, Pete, why don't you take it away?
Yes, if you have made this far and you want to support us, the best way to do so, like, comment, subscribe, leave a review on whatever platform you're watching or listening to us on. Next week is our fall review. Afterwards, we are entering our anime of the year season, so look forward to that. If you're unfamiliar, for every 1 vote we get for anime of the year, I will be donating $1 to a charity this year. I'm gonna do a charity. It's way easier than trying to find a library to donate manga to after that whole debacle. So I'll let people know like what we're donating to when that time comes around. So look forward to that. Otherwise, if you're here for Watch Club in 2 weeks, we will see you for Cautious Hero. Thanks, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.